Hello friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Mel, and today I am here to discuss every single thing I read in the month of September. I am ready, I've got all the thoughts, I've got all the opinions, I've got the thunder ASMR because it's about to start raining. But I hope you guys are ready, I hope you've got your drink of choice, and let me know down in the comments what you guys read this past month because I am super excited to know. I love discussing wrap-ups with you guys, and I just love snooping. Like, I'm nosy. I love to see what everybody read, so definitely let me know down in the comments. And speaking of books of the month, my puns are terrible. I do want to give a shout out to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. If you guys are longtime viewers of my channel, then you know how much I love Book of the Month. They are one of my favorite book subscription services, especially because it allows you to choose exactly what you're getting every single month. Book of the Month is super committed towards promoting new and emerging authors and really allowing you, the reader, to spend more time reading, less time researching, and to give you a platform where you can find new books to read, love, recommend, and absolutely devour. Every single month, they give you a curated selection of new and early release titles from 5 to 7 from a variety of different genres, and in order to do that, their team vets through hundreds of books every single month, so they scour all of those new releases, so they get all of that job done for you. They pick their favorites, and then you get to pick which ones to receive. These were the 2 books that I received this month, and I am so excited to read these. I've especially seen people rave about As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, so when I saw that this was going to be one of the picks this month, I had to choose this one so that I could experience it for myself. And the other book I chose was Thistlefoot because I saw that this was a Baba Yaga retelling, and the cover is fantastic. So if you'd like to see all of the other selections that Book of the Month has for this particular month, I will be leaving a link at the top of the description, and you can also use my code MelReads to get your very first book for $9.99. So I really love how accessible they're making this for everybody. So again, thank you Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Love you guys the most. I have to say, we started September incredibly well because the very first thing I read was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This was an absolutely phenomenal read. She is a terrific writer, and I really do hope she pursues writing outside of the scope of her memoir, because even talks about it in the book that when she was super young, she wanted to pursue writing, but because it didn't align with what her mom wanted for her or what her mom was projecting onto her, she completely gave up that dream. But I would love to see fiction from Jeanette McCurdy. I think it'd be really interesting just based on her writing style, and this was a 5 out of 5 stars. I think she really found a perfect medium between painting how horrific the situation with her mom was, whilst at the same time making sure that her love for her mom in all stages of life was felt. And I thought that was so interesting too with the way the book was structured and written, that we start out with Jeanette being incredibly young, really being able to glimpse into her mindset, her thoughts, and how she normalized and rationalized a lot of her mom's behaviors that ultimately ended up impacting her in the long run. But seeing that sort of naivety, let me just say innocence because I don't know how to pronounce words, but I think the nuance in which she wrote that was tremendous. So we really get this juxtaposition between the two that I absolutely adored. There are still conversations about being a child actor, and I think in the scope of Jeanette McCurdy, it's super interesting because she never really wanted to go into this lifestyle, and she did so because her mom was projecting a lot of her insecurities and wants and dreams onto her. And so I think it adds an extra layer of complexity into her life and into her story to see child acting from the scope of I never really wanted to be here in the first place, and really having to deal with terrible situations with executives and with producers, with showrunners. And I think this memoir comes at an opportune time for a myriad of reasons, but particularly in the child acting portion of it. For the past few years, there's been so many conversations about having the right people and the right measures on set to make sure that the children in the industry are protected and are taken care of, because they're so young and they're surrounded by adults, and you never really know when anything could go awry. And so the way she navigated the conversation surrounding that as well, and how that led to, again, substance abuse and a lot of insecurities, and even the media pitting women against women, and how the media deeply affects how you view yourself and your body and your image, really made for such an impactful and immersive reading experience. The next thing I finished in the month of September, because I did start this in August, was Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. And honestly, after a few sucky books in the series, and I say sucky books and take it with a grain of salt because as a reread experience, I've just been noticing more and more things that are super bothersome. Going into this, I was a little bit scared because I was like, I'm really not enjoying my experience so far, and I am terribly afraid of continuing with this reread experience and then getting to an endpoint where I hate all of it. But I'm glad to say I did give this a 4-star. It was definitely better than the other 2. I did read this for a read along we're doing over on Patreon. By the way, if you want to join us, the link is always down below. I'm just saying this month is going to be absolutely fantastic. This book just makes for such an interesting reading experience because we get the world expansion that's been hinted at for the first 3 installments, including the prequel, which I always just count before Throne of Glass. Without the magic itself, it doesn't make for that compelling of a read, and so I love walking into this, seeing all of the new characters, seeing all of the new creatures, and really seeing the thick of the plot that also has been foreshadowed and hinted at in the first 2 books. Seeing that develop and be a little bit more established in this, I really enjoyed that portion of it. 2 of my favorite characters are introduced in this book, which are Rowan and Manon, and I think, speaking of the magic system, they are 2 of the best vessels, in my opinion, to that magic system. I think their powers and the way that they handle themselves and the way they've experienced so much add so much to the story, and so I absolutely adore them as characters. I love everything they bring into this. He looks like Geralt of Rivia. What is it with blonde, platinum blonde men that are kind of toxic? I can just list them: Geralt of Rivia, Rowan, Daemon Targaryen. Listen, it's a mess in this household. We've never said otherwise. At the core of this book also is Celaena's journey, and Celaena starting to become who she needs to be rather than what she wants to be. And I think as a universal learning experience for the character, I love reading that. I love reading characters starting to come to their own and really snap into it, and Celaena needed to snap into it because for the entire first 3 books, she's been super bratty and she's just been doing whatever the hell she wants to do. Things that I didn't like about this that I think are a common thread so far with the series is that Janet really sees the world, or at least in her series, in a very binary way. It's very male, female, it's very he, she, and it doesn't really allow room for a lot of diversity on that end. The possessive language of the Fae in her series, I think, is just a lot. And beyond that, I think she tends to equate a masculine side to a woman as the more powerful, worthy, impactful personality. And then she tends to equate femininity to something that's more weak and something that is not as worthy. I think a lot of the decisions she makes really work to her detriment, and I don't know if she realizes that either. And the next thing I read in September was The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I think overall the series sparks a lot of controversy on both ends, both for the people that enjoy this and it having a lot of religious allegory and people critiquing that the books are just really heavy on that, and then on the other side, people not enjoying the books because of the religious allegories, and then people who very much love that and grew up reading them and the books holding a very nostalgic place in their hearts, really critiquing that as well. It's really interesting to observe what the series has done in terms of public reception, and I think particularly as of recent years, I think online I tend to see just a bunch of everything, and I wanted to read this because I rewatched the movie, the first one, and then I also dreamt of a lion, and so it just started piling up, and I was like, damn, maybe I should read Narnia, maybe I should read the series. The very first book I ever read on my own was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that happened years ago, so I didn't remember any of it, and I genuinely love the movies, at least the first 2. Como le digo que no hablamos de Bruno, pero tampoco hablamos de Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I honestly was super interested in reading this and seeing where I fell into in terms of the opinions I've seen in the past. I think there's a space for both things, right? There's a space for the people who absolutely adore the series and they love everything that Lewis included in here in terms of the allegories and the thematic statements, but I also think there's a place for people who don't really enjoy the religious allegories, who don't really understand all of it, for people who dislike the books because of the religious allegories. I think there's a space for both, and I think there's a lot of nuance going into that when regarding religious trauma, one's relationship with religion. Overall, it lent for a really amazing reading experience, although I didn't love every single book in the series, and so although I do have my own personal opinions on the series and what each book did or fails to do, I still thought it was a really interesting experience overall. So let me walk you through my ratings and let me tell you what my favorite was. We have The Magician's Nephew that I gave 4 stars to, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that I gave 3.5 stars to, The Horse and His Boy that I gave 1 star to, Prince Caspian, which was a 2 star, Voyage of the Dawn Treader was a 1.5 star for me, The Silver Chair was a 2.5 star, and finally The Last Battle, which was also a 2 star. So really the experience reading these was all over the place. My favorite was personally The Magician's Nephew. I thought there was something particularly interesting about the creation of Narnia and the players into that and all that it represents. So I think in that regard, this book was just absolutely stunning, my absolute favorite. I think I would reread these 2 again. I just wouldn't look at the rest of the series if I'm being honest. In the midst of reading Narnia, I did read other books, and one of them was Where Hope Comes From by Nikita Gill. Now this is a poetry collection, and I honestly had not read a poetry collection in such a long time that while I was reading Narnia, I was like, I kind of need something else, something to break the monotony of the Narnia books, and this just came through at the right time for me. I love poetry that is not necessarily rhymey, and I don't know if there's a name for it because growing up, I was never really into poetry. So whenever we were being taught poetry in school, I would just zone out. But I love poetry like this where it's just thought dumb. It genuinely feels as if all of those intrusive thoughts, as if all of those internal questionings are just dumped onto the page and they're verbalized. And I love poetry like that. This book really deals with the idea of healing and healing after a very difficult time. This was written during the Panini, and at that point in time, how being separated from the people that we love made a lot of us snap into reality in a way and really come to terms with the fact that we aren't expressing our love enough and we aren't really taking advantage of our time to the fullest, and all of the things that we took for granted are the most beautiful and important things. And the way the collection depicts that, I think, is really, really stunning. And at the core of the collection really is this idea that because the world got even bigger than it already was because of the situation and how everything seemed so isolated and distant, because it was, it presents the idea and the navigation of it, of wanting to almost give up or seeing no hope in life because of how bleak it looks, but how even through all of the disparities and how even through all of these difficult situations, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But beyond the cheesy saying, the collection makes a really, really great job at constructing all of these ideas and all of these thoughts and laying them out on the table. And I'm starting to notice that the poetry collections I like the most are the ones that deal with being lonely. Listen, a girl needs duality in all things, because as I was reading Narnia, I decided to take a turn. I decided to take a break, and I ended up reading Priest by Sierra Simone. So while I was reading some really strong religious allegory, I felt like I needed to bathe in holy water by all of the smut that I was reading. Perdóname, Padre, porque he pecado. There were parts of the book that I really wasn't into, and I think the title itself alludes to what this book is. It is an erotica, it is a romance about a newly appointed priest who falls in love with the girl who came in for a confession. There's things with holy waters, there are things on altars. It's very blasphemous, which I think was a nice contrast to reading the Chronicles of Narnia. Listen, there were weird things in here that I was reading and I was like, Tyler, sir, calm down. And then the girly pop too, she was sort of, you know, they just make for a really weird couple. And I think the funniest thing to me was how everybody adored Tyler as a priest because of his history, his sister's story in particular, and how he felt so called to being a priest to change the dynamics in his local church. People really looked up to him. So everybody was like, he is a man of God, he is a man of religion, and he was over here literally fucking Miss Girly Pop over at the altar. Anyways, it was an interesting reading experience. Do I think I'll carry through with the series? I'm not sure. Because if the other ones are anywhere near as weird as this one, I don't know if I can handle that, because Mr. Mance was really comparing her to the communion, and listen, I gave this 3 stars. And you know what? For the shits and giggles, it worked fantastic. I decided to catch up on Spy Family in September, which was so unexpected. I really wasn't planning on reading them anytime soon, primarily because I wanted to read them physically. I wanted to buy them, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult to find volumes of Spy Family. Sometimes they're in stock, sometimes they're not, but I managed to borrow them all from Libby, and I read volumes 2 through 7. And I think like every other manga series, it fluctuates between some volumes being really, really great and some volumes being a little bit more uninteresting. However, I think the storyline is getting so massively complicated in a way that's just so hilarious, and it makes for such an engaging reading experience. In Spy Family, we have a spy with a mission. His name is Twilight, and he needs to meet this man that is very intrinsically connected to a potential war that's brewing in the country they live in. And in order to accomplish this mission, he needs to build a false family. So he ends up acquiring a wife. Her name is Yor, and what he doesn't know is that she's an assassin. She doesn't know that he's a spy. And then he gets a kid, not in that order. The kid is a telepath. In the long run, they also end up getting a dog, and this dog can see the future. So it's all kinds of crazy. And now Anya, who's the kid in these last few volumes, has entered school, and in school we get a totally different dynamic, obviously, but still her feeling like she needs to help with the mission and help her dad really figure out what's going on and befriend Damien Desmond, who is the kid of the man Twilight the spy has to get to know in order to debunk this whole situation. And this kid hates Anya, and so their interactions, their banter is so freaking funny because she is really trying her best, but poor Anya fails every single time. Like, this kid cannot get it right to save her life, and it is honestly the absolute coziest, funny, heartfelt manga series I've personally read. It is just such a fun experience. I think the manga series is truly doing a fantastic job at presenting us with the situation at hand and how important it is for this mission to succeed, but also presenting us with all of these characters' backstories and what exactly makes them who they are at the start and development process of the series. Let me run you through my ratings. Volume 2 was a 3-star, Volume 3 was a 4-star, Volume 4 was a 5-star, and Volume 5 was a 3-star. Then Volume 6 was actually a 2.5, and Volume 7 we went back up to a 5-star. So I do have Volume 8 on my Libby borrowed shelf, so I will be reading that this month and I will report back because that is the latest volume, and after that it's waiting till 2023. And for the last two things I read last month, we first have The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon, and I thought I would love this. This was in my fall TBR, and unfortunately I didn't end up loving this. I think I gave this, pretty sure I gave this a 2-star. I think the premise of this really is interesting. We've got our two main characters, Heart and Mercy. Heart is a marshal who hunts these zombie-like creatures so that they don't hurt the people, and then Mercy handles her family business, which is Bertzel and Sons Undertakers. These two are enemies. They absolutely hate each other, and they soon start corresponding with each other, and they become pen pals, and they start building this really amazing connection like they've never seen before in their own separate personal lives. However, they don't know that they're corresponding with each other. These letters are addressed to a friend, and yet I think it failed at almost everything it wanted to do, at least in my opinion and my experience. There are parts of this that I really did like how they were executed, like Hart's relationship to Duckers, who is his trainee. I thought their relationship and their dynamic and their banter was really fantastic. Duckers really brought in a lot of important lessons to Hart's life, particularly with trusting people and learning to open up and being willing and open to loving in a way that he really hasn't done before because of his own trauma. And so in that regard, I thought the relationship was beautiful. And when they were corresponding with each other through the letters, I thought that part was so beautiful and so funny. Loved every second of that. But when we got into the thick of the story, and particularly I think my issue was Mercy, unfortunately, she was incredibly petty, and it made for such an unpleasant reading experience. When looking at her and her dynamic with her family, she was being incredibly toxic. She was projecting onto people. She was laying so many unnecessary expectations onto her siblings, especially when she doesn't agree with a lot of these pushed expectations. And one massive part of the book as well was how she was guarding a secret from each of her family members, and she had the pettiest moment revolving around that. She was also incredibly petty to Heart a lot of the time. She really ruined the entire book for me. And last but not least, I read King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett Sinclair. I ate this up. I loved this so much. I was looking for a fantasy romance that had everything. It had a good plot, it had great characters, it was muddy, and this really delivered on that front. Beyond that, I had also been on the lookout for a really good paranormal romance that features a vampire, and this one has a vampire romance. The enemies to lovers in this was phenomenal. I love that Adrian really is a bad guy for everybody else. Yes, he's a conqueror, and yes, he's a murderer, and yes, he is very fucking ruthless. But when it comes to her, he will cater to her every need. He constantly reinforces the fact that you are my queen and I married you for a reason. And if you are here, it's because I expect you to fulfill that role as the queen. You do not need to ask me for permission. If you are in the position of power, I trust you enough to make the right decisions. And I loved that. I loved that because it just built the tension so well of her hating him, but her having fewer and fewer reasons to hate him as the book went forward because he kept treating her right despite being horrible to everybody else. I ate this shit up. I also loved how Scarlett Sinclair built Isolde's character. I think she was challenged so beautifully in this to never really judge something based on what other people have told you, but rather to discern things by yourself. And that plays into this book so much, so many times, with her judging Adrian wrongfully, with her judging his mission completely wrong, with her not truly knowing how the world looks and how it operates because she has been very sheltered. And I also also adored the fact that she was a fighter. She was very capable. Her agency was at an all-time high for the entire book. Oh, gave it 4.5 stars, by the way. I bumped it down 0.5 only because there was one trope in here that was utilized that I hate. And that's it, friends. That's everything that I read in the month of September. Let me know if you've read any of these books. What are your takes on them? And what you guys also read in the month of September. I love snooping, seeing, chismosear, me encanta ver todo. I love seeing everything you guys read and chatting about it. So definitely let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a massive thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And also, if you want extra content, Patreon is the place to be. We have a Discord server. We've got 2 book clubs, 2 readathons a month. We've got weekly movie nights, weekly sprints. It just keeps on building. Again, thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget that you can get your very first book for $9.99 using my code MelReads. I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye, guys.